Welcome to The Cutting Edge, an evening full of amendment votes tied to the Senate's annual budget resolution. And E&E Daily's Nick Giuliano was on the Hill last night covering them all. Nick, we'll get to that in a moment, but first I want to start with the news this morning that Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid has announced he will not be seeking re-election. What does this do for the power struggle in the Senate, and what does it do for the legislation that we might see over the next 22 months?
Sure, yeah. I mean, this was big news this morning, really sort of shook a D.C. that's a little groggy from last night's vote-a-rama, but, certainly woke everybody up before they might have had their coffee, in my case at least. I mean, this is huge. This is the first time since, I think, 2007 that a member of one of the four main party leaders on the House or Senate has left their post. So, we're going to have jockeying for, who's going to take his place. Chuck Schumer and Dick Durbin are sort of his, Dick Durbin's number 2 and Schumer's number 3. They're seen as jockeying. Patty Murray's a member of leadership. She may get into the mix. There's going to be a lot of fun ahead, I guess, as a leadership race develops.
Yeah, and that Nevada seat also will be an interesting one to keep an eye on. So let's get to those votes last night. The Senate voted on a handful of energy and environment-related amendments. The Clean Power Plan was targeted. How did it turn out?
Sure. So Senator McConnell had an amendment that basically said EPA cannot deny highway funds to states that don't go along with the Clean Power Plan. And this is part of a case that he's sort of been building over essentially the course of this month. At the beginning of the month, he wrote an op-ed in one of his home state newspapers that said, states should not go along with this plan. He thinks it's illegal. He thinks courts will throw it out. So he wants governors to adopt that position. He wrote a letter to the National Governors Association. Now, this amendment was trying to sort of test this proposition. It didn't do, it passed. It got 57 votes, enough to be attached to the budget because there's no filibuster under those rules. But when it comes time to actually do something that will count, they're still going to need 60 votes, and they haven't been able to quite find that number yet. Now, there was another climate amendment that was considered. McConnell was co-sponsoring with Senator Rob Portman that would have explicitly said states have the option to opt out of EPA's power plan if they can show harm to their economy or concerns about electric reliability, things like that. That was something that we thought would maybe see a vote. It was sort of unclear throughout the night and, ended up being sort of left on the cutting room floor with quite a few other things.
Right. And Senator Portman, as you reported earlier this week, he's kind of walking this tightrope on climate change. Politically, did he sort of buy himself cover heading into his reelection bid?
It's sort of tough to say. He was an interesting one to watch this week because Democrats had a few more amendments that they brought up on sort of the climate, the science of climate change and this question of, is it real? Is it something that humans are contributing to? Is it something that we need to deal with through government policy? Again, these are all non-binding amendments that just sort of float this idea and say, what do you think about it? But Senator Portman joined Democrats on a few of those amendments that sort of posited this idea. He's also a critic of the EPA rule. So, he says these things are consistent. I talked to him about this yesterday. He says, I think this is a problem. We need to address it. EPA isn't going about it in the right way. He talks up things like energy efficiency has been one of his big issues for months. And actually on that front, he did get a very small win last night with a little efficiency bill was one of the sort of last pieces of business they took care of before wrapping up for the week.
And earlier this week, there were votes on waters of the U.S. and climate change. And how did those turn out?
Sure, yeah. So the climate ones I was just talking about, waters of the U.S., this is EPA's rule to deal with sort of the jurisdiction of the Clean Water Act, which is a question that has been fairly unresolved for years, and it's a pretty complicated issue. EPA has a proposal that they've been working on more or less throughout the Obama administration to try and sort of clear up this question of, what streams, what wetlands are due automatic protection under this federal law. Republicans don't like the rule, as they don't like most of what's coming out of EPA under President Obama. Notably, last night they think they may have found their 60th vote when there was an amendment that came up. Senator Amy Klobuchar, she's a Democrat from Minnesota, has been critical of the rule, but on a similar test vote 2 years ago, she sided with most Democrats in essentially voting to maintain the water rule. Now, again, this was it's not a perfect proxy, but it provides an indication. I asked Senator Klobuchar about this last night. She says, I look at things on a case-by-case basis. We'll have to see, when it gets time later this year to talk about, appropriations riders or something like that. But she's certainly one to watch.
And like you said, these votes were all non-binding, but they do kind of tell us what senators are thinking about and what their thinking is on particular issues. What did last night's Vote-A-Rama kind of predict on what we might see on energy policy from the Senate this year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, the big takeaways, in terms of what may actually be able to be accomplished in terms of sort of regulatory reforms that Republicans would like to achieve, they look to the appropriations process. So, their 60 may be in play on Waters of the U.S. They're going to have to sort of tinker, I think, a bit with their approach on the climate rule. That will all come together. Separately, Senator Murkowski and Senator Cantwell have been working for the last couple of months, and will continue to work over the recess on trying to put together a larger energy bill. A lot of the issues that are going to be addressed on that front didn't necessarily come up this week. That's going to deal a lot with things like infrastructure and energy efficiency and energy production. We didn't see things like offshore drilling amendments. So, it's sort of a situation where you can't cover everything, even when you're voting back to back for 16 hours at a time.
All right. Thank you so much, Nick. I know it was a very long night for you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
More Cutting Edge coming next Friday. We'll see you then.